3, 2.
Coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking with Paul Schwartz from the New York Post to help us break down the Giants matchup, as well as introduce two new segments, What's Driving Patrick Crazy and Tweet of the Week. Cowboys Central Radio starts now.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
Welcome to Cowboys Central Radio, brought to you by Bonita Tequila. And now here's Patrick Kahn and Keith Mullins.
Doesn't matter where we go, silver, blue, white, away or home. It doesn't matter who you are, you know we're coming when you see the star. We're laying down tracks, you're never gonna walk in ahead of our time. While you were busy watching, everybody wants to be a lone star, a hero, but only Texas has it all.
Welcome, everybody, to Cowboys Central Radio. I am your host, Patrick Kahn. With me, as always, is my co-host, Keith Mullins. And, Keith, so we had a week. We didn't have to worry about a Cowboys loss on Sunday. But the one thing that we didn't want to happen happened, but unfortunately nothing we can do about it. RG3 did RG3 things, blew the game late, threw his coach under the bus afterwards. And now the Cowboys are in second place. So first off, I want to know how you felt with not having a game last week, and kind of your thoughts on now the Cowboys in second place rather than first place as they've been much of the season.
Is this the introduction of the how did you spend your bye week segment? I feel like I should be writing how I spent my summer vacation on the blackboard right now. It definitely a week to stew on the New Orleans loss. It was brutal in all facets, and certainly the most brutal loss not only of this season, but it harkened back to some of the ugliness of the Dave Campo era for Cowboys fans in terms of offensive ineptitude. So a rough week for fans to have to sit through with that taste in their mouth. I'm sure it was for the players as well, although they got to get back to work. And quite a difference in getting back to work. There were a whole lot of new smiling faces back at practice today. So I think as the Cowboys get ready for the Giants, it's not often that you talk about a must-win game in Week 12, but I certainly think that's what the Cowboys are facing in this divisional matchup.
Yeah, with the role that the Philadelphia Eagles have been on as of late, go back the last 7 games, they haven't given up 21 points or more. Much since the Broncos game where they give up 52 points to Peyton Manning, which, was just one more point than what the Cowboys gave up. So they seem to be on quite a roll right now. So, yes, moving forward, every game seems like it is. It's going to be a Cowboys must-win. So with what's going on around the division, and we're kind of seeing the players who's in, who's out, and it seems like the 3 teams that are in a dogfight the rest of the season between the Giants, Cowboys, and Eagles. It doesn't seem like there's going to be much of a fight left in the Redskins with looking at the remaining schedule. The way RG3 and that offense is playing, and he came out this after the loss and said that it was due to predictable play calling. So he's throwing Kyle Shanahan under the bus for the guy who calls the plays. Even yesterday or the day before, I heard a quote from Santana Moss where he was saying that it's time for RG3 to man up, to be that guy. Darryl Green, who's, a legendary Washington Redskin, a guy that, every time the Redskins and Cowboys played, I was worried about who Darryl Green was covering because he always seemed to be around the ball making big plays. And he comes out and questions RG3's leadership. Now, is it a big shock to you that they're questioning this? I mean, it seemed like there was issues, even dating back to college, where people were questioning RG3 gets to the league and after every play he's wanting a foul, or he's griping about this guy did this or this guy did that. I mean, is he going to be a problem for that Redskins organization? Looking at it right now, 4 number 1 draft picks for him. I really think that the Redskins shot themselves in the foot on that one.
Yeah, I think if it's possible the Redskins might be in more disarray than any other team in the NFC East. And that's saying something given the up and down nature of every other team in the division, a division where no one has consistently shown the ability or will to string together victories. So, RG3, there were some rumblings to that effect for very early on in this season. And we've seen some sniping from some of the veterans on the roster. So certainly it looks like, Shanahan has some locker room discord that he needs to get his arms around. I saw an RG3 response today that maybe he needed to start using the words I and me more in those post-game press conferences rather than we. And I think that he may be missing the problem, and I think that it's that I and me are in his mind plenty. And so I think that's what his teammates are responding to. But, I think the Redskins at this point, in this race to mediocrity that the NFC East has been tracking on, it's hard to discount anyone. Obviously, mathematical elimination is a long way down the road in this particular division, but I think you're right. With the road that faces them ahead and the fact that neither side of the football really seems to be putting much together, the Redskins are the easiest team to discount. The Eagles now, for the first time, we're not talking about the first place Dallas Cowboys, so the Eagles have moved a half game ahead. The Cowboys do obviously hold the tiebreaker by virtue of their win in Philadelphia. And this week we'll get a chance to move back into first place in this Giants game. But, the Eagles seem to be figuring some things out. They seem to be playing better. I think they still do have trouble on that defense, but offensively, Nick Foles has been a revelation since he took over the starting quarterback role. 16 touchdown passes against 0 interceptions. He certainly seems to be making the most of Chip Kelly's offense, despite the fact that no one saw him as a prototypical trigger man for that particular system. He certainly has been efficient and made use of weapons that Michael Vick, frankly, wasn't finding. So the reemergence of Deshaun Jackson as a deep threat has to trouble the rest of the division. Riley Cooper suddenly is finding the end zone. So the Eagles certainly have some things going, and LaShawn McCoy continues to lead the league in rushing and be his spectacular self. The Cowboys were the only team that's really succeeded in shutting McCoy down. So the Giants, who started 0-6, and we'll get into Giants prep this week, started 0-6, have won 4 straight, seems to have given the fan base a lot of confidence. I noticed that they've been crawling back out of their various holes on Twitter and other media outlets. Seems to have given the players a lot of confidence. Chase and Pierre-Paul took the opportunity to snipe at the Cowboys, talking about how they were going to put it on Dallas and that there would be a lot of blood spilled on the field this week. So the defense is buoyed, but is that balloon set to burst? Is that an artificial bubble? The Giants' 4-game winning streak has been against such quarterbacking luminaries as Terrell Pryor, Matt Barkley, Scott Tolzien in his first ever NFL start for the Green Bay Packers. So this is not. Oh, and Josh Freeman after about 72 hours of practice time with the Minnesota Vikings. So this has not exactly been a murderer's row of future Hall of Fame quarterbacks the Giants have faced. So, confidence means a lot to a team, but their defensive resurgence, this might be something that you can stick a pin in if you can score early on them and start to take some of the wind out of their sails, I think.
Yeah, I think you're dead on there talking about the Giants, but we'll get into the Giants a little bit later when Paul Schwartz from the New York Post joins us. But coming up next, we're going to debut our new segment, Tweet of the Week and What's Bothering Patrick, coming up after this.
Football fans, check out ProFootballCentral.com for all the latest NFL news and analysis. Also, check out the very popular Pro Football Central Radio Network for awesome NFL talk around the league. Go to ProFootballCentral.com. ProFootballCentral.com.
Don't wanna be an American idiot. Don't want a nation under the new media. Hey, can you hear the sound of hysteria?
Let's take a moment and pay respect to the awesome referees in the National Football League and give a great example of how awesome they are.
Unnecessary, after the play was over, unnecessary roughness on number 52. Excuse me a minute.
Okay. Mike, this is like a wanna get away commercial.
There are multiple fouls on the play. Unnecessary roughness on the kicking team, number 92, 52. Unnecessary roughness on the receiving team, number 57. Those fouls offset. There's also a holding, number 92, on the return team. All those fouls offset at the spot of that foul. First down, Dallas.
Okay, maybe that was a bad example.
Well, okay, so there was 3 penalties there. How can they offset each other? I don't get it. If there's 3, only 2 of them can offset, right?
I don't think he could get it either.
I don't know. I think I know more than the referees do. That's not saying too much. Okay, so we want to get into our new segment of the week. Actually going to have 2 in this period. We're going to talk about Tweet of the Week and what's bothering Patrick. So first off, Tweet of the Week. Last night I posted up on ProFootballCentral.com where I cover the NFC East that I just put up my NFC East prediction, and Cowboy fans won't like it. So this week's Tweet of the Week goes to EA Sports DFW. That is his Twitter handle. He said, "I don't see the Eagles winning the final game. Not sold on Foles yet. You just hate Garrett too much. You want them to fail." Okay, First off, as a Cowboys fan, I cover the team that I root for. I am most definitely not going to root against my team. I'm not going to hope for failure. The whole point of what I was saying there is I'm not expecting anything of the Cowboys for the simple fact that they haven't done anything to show me that they were going to do it. Jason Garrett has been the head coach for 3 years now, and in 3 years, what has he got? 3-8-8 records. The only time that he had a winning record is when he took over the Cowboys midway through I believe it was the 2009 season when Tony Romo broke his clavicle and he took him to a 5-3 record without him. And honestly, they probably should have lost that last game. The Cowboys played Stephen McGee, who's no longer with the team, and he was able to pull off a victory against Philadelphia, so they ended up with that 5-3. So. But in all honesty, he's a mediocre coach. He's a 500 coach. So I'm not rooting for them to fail. I'm being objective to the situation. Jason Garrett has had time to do this, and he just hasn't been able to do it. But that kind of goes into my next point and what's bothering Patrick. The thing that's bothering me is it seems like these Dallas Cowboy fans, as much as I love them, they're becoming like teenage girls. They're wanting more than what they're getting. You know, they expect things. It's like kids today. They expect the iPhone. They expect the nice car. They don't want to have to work for it. You can't expect a Super Bowl every year. While you can, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to be like the Cowboy fans are now. They're upset because they're 500. They're in second place. And I hate to steal a line from Jason Garrett, the guy that I seem to be bashing lately, but it's a process. And I truly believe that you have to build on things. Get into the playoffs for once.
That's fine.
Commented about it.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm not laughing about it. You think this is funny? I take this serious.
I'm not.
Real serious. I put my heart and soul into this every.
Exactly. That's how I feel.
Come on, you're not sandbagging for scorched earth at this point?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that Cowboy fans today are expecting them to go to the Super Bowl. Okay, yes, 93, 94, 95. They were in the Super Bowl, in the NFC Championship every season. But they didn't get there going from worst to first. It took Jimmy Johnson building them up. And when Bill Parcells came in, he built them up. He took over a team that was 5-11, 3 seasons in a row. And he made them into a playoff team. And then Wade Phillips comes in, and he just basically takes it over because Bill Parcells was done at that point. But as we saw, he couldn't get them over the hump because he wasn't the right style coach. Jason Garrett is not the right style of coach. And these Cowboy fans have got to understand that there are certain types of coaches that can work with Jerry Jones. And the ones that they've gotten the last 2 times just doesn't work.
So what you're saying is that you're not satisfied with 500 and you expect more?
No, I expect for them to, yes, I do expect more. to go to with the Cowboy fans. I do expect more, but the problem is that Cowboy fans are expecting more out of what they currently have, and that's just not going to cut it.
So are you prepping your short list for the next coach of the Dallas Cowboys at this point, since you're rooting for Jason Garrett to fail?
Obviously I'm rooting for him to fail, so I have it up on my whiteboard. I want a guy to come in, and I want a coach that's going to come in and tell me about, hey, could you tell me a little bit about Spider 2 White Banana? I don't care who it is. Get rid of Jason Garrett.
So do you think in this team's never-ending roller coaster cycle of cupcake coach, hard-ass drill instructor coach, cupcake coach, hard-ass drill instructor, it's time for the drill instructor again?
Well, yeah, I think they went with 2 cupcakes in a row. I mean, you can sit there and tell me that Jason Garrett's not a cupcake coach, but every time I hear him in a press conference, honestly, I'm sick and tired of hearing about the process, because obviously the process sucks.
Back-to-back cupcakes? What is this, a Sprinkles franchise?
We don't have a football guy running it, so what'd you expect?
Well, I think I'm most fascinated by the fact that I could just sit here and push your buttons throughout the entire What's Bothering Patrick segment. I have a feeling that I might be the feature of What's Bothering Patrick in next week's segment.
No, I might we might go back to referees. I think that might be my next segment, especially after.
That does bring an interesting point of the 2 big officiating issues that surfaced in the NFL this week. It's the NFL's worst nightmare that come Monday, or after a Monday night game come Tuesday, that around the water cooler all folks want to talk about are officiating plays that ended games. But of course you had it in New Orleans with the high tackle or high hit on the quarterback by Ahmad Brooks, which that fine actually got handed down today. I think it was $17,000, $17,500 for Brooks, which Ray Lewis has pledged out of the goodness of his heart to pay half of, because he thought it was an offense to the manhood of defenders everywhere. And
in the next segment, why former athletes go broke.
Hey, Ray was ready to break out. He broke out the Amex on set. He felt so strongly about that. It was a highly charged rant. I didn't want to be any of the former quarterbacks that shared that set with him, out of fear that Ray might just lay a horse collar or a clothesline on any of them at any given moment, just to demonstrate how illegal it should be. And then, of course, in the Carolina game, the mugging of Gronkowski on the final play of the game triggers a huge debate about whether or not the play was a catchable pass. And I think you and I have talked about this at length previously. My favorite thing about football as a sport is that it's a tapestry. The game is a tapestry of opportunity. 70-odd plays on offense, 70-odd plays on defense. Every one of them can be the play that contributes to your team winning or losing. I had a favorite coach that said, make enough plays and the officials can't decide the game. So I do hate when folks only want to talk about an officiating call at the end of a game, because you had plenty of opportunities to avoid being put in that situation. But certainly it is the league's worst nightmare for the officials to be put under the microscope the way they have been this week.
Yeah, so you want to just to reiterate your point. You want to talk about making plays. So it's not on Colin Kaepernick for missing a wide open Frank Gore when he had nobody in front of him. It's not against the Patriots for allowing Carolina to just march down the field, eat up the clock, and get in the end zone to take over that game. It's more than just the referees. Although, everybody wants to put it on them. However, it's up to the players to make plays. Referees are just there to enforce the rules, and occasionally they get it wrong or they get it right. But
I think.
No,
I think I saw the play in Carolina probably as the more egregious of the two. For as much as people wanted to espouse whether Breeze got that call because he's Drew Brees, and whether or not Scott Tolzien would have gotten the same call, or I think the silliest argument that I heard was actually from Ray Lewis, was that if you put that same hit on Peyton Manning at 6'4", that it isn't around his neck, it's in his chest. Well, that's really excusing the defender of any culpability. You know how tightly they're calling hits on quarterbacks. The whole point is that you lower your target area. And to make the assertion that you don't need you can have one universal target area no matter the height of the player that you're striking, I think is ridiculous. So I think too much of lumping something on the officials excuses the failure to make a play by the players involved. So I think you're right. Players play. Officials are there, and you're going to get calls that go both ways. Certainly the New England Patriots during this run of successful seasons have been the beneficiary of situations where officiating at the end of a game mattered, back to the tuck rule. So I think that it makes way too much of it and ultimately takes away from the game. So hopefully we don't see quite so many calls on the final play that factor so heavily in the outcome. But 2 in 1 week is certainly something that has to have Roger Goodell's ears burning just a little bit.
Yeah, and you want to talk about referees. How about the referee in the Redskin-Eagles game who his name is not jumping out to me at this moment, but Trent Williams, offensive lineman, said that he said a few comments towards him, and apparently Mike Pereira, who's now at Fox, used to be the head official or head of officiating for the NFL, and he said that he's had to sit that guy down before and have conversations with him about that. So how much trouble do you think he's about to get in as well? I mean, if they've already had to sit down with you, I got to expect that you may be on the outs.
Yeah, I think that there's always a lot of chatter that fans aren't privy to that goes back and forth between players, not just between players on opposing sides, but players and officials. Certainly, some of those conversations are some of them are funny. Some of them are certainly border on the vulgar. So we see this back and forth quite a bit. I think for an official to take it to the level of personal attack, certainly you'll see officials tell players to shut up and play, or maybe the type of comment that just go make a play, right? And sort of the same thing we've been talking about, make a play and the call won't matter. Those kinds of comments. But if the quote that Williams attributes to this official is true, I think you're right. He could be in a bit of hot water. Although after watching Fletcher Cox and some of those Eagles defenders work against the Redskins line, maybe the official's just trained to call it exactly how he sees it, and maybe it was a case of just a little too much truth escaping. But actually, I think you're right. You could see him sat down for a game. You could see him eventually find his way out of the league if something like that is proven. And apparently the Redskins interior offensive linemen were mic'd up. So this should be one where the evidence is readily available thanks to the good folks at NFL Films and modern technology. They seem to be micing up half the league these days every week. So it's one that they certainly should be able to get to the bottom of, much like the microphone evidence, helped to exonerate Des Bryant and his sideline rant, which turned out to be more encouragement and discussion than actual negativity. So I think that it'll be interesting to see what comes of that situation. But it wasn't surprising to see that it was more swirling around the Redskins. They're rapidly approaching dumpster fire status, and the question is this team? What is the mental state of the Cowboys coming out of this bye week? That's a good point. Is this
team heading towards that? And we're going to get a little bit more into. It's really funny when that whole Williams thing came out, and they said a referee said this. First thing that popped in my mind is that how Richie Incognito got back in the league? Did he put on the stripes and go out there so he could talk some more trash to offensive linemen? I really, I wasn't 100% sure there. I was like, wow, that's a shocking moment there. But coming up next, we're going to be talking with Paul Schwartz from the New York Post and kind of give us a breakdown of the Giants right after this.
TomahawkShades.com and get your lethally stylish pair of sunglasses. Great quality for a great price. Shades on, problems gone. TomahawkShades.com.
I wanted the fame, but not the cover of Newsweek. Oh well, guess beggars can't be choosy. Wanted to receive attention from my music. Wanted to be left alone in public, excuse me. But wanting my cake and eat it too. And wanting it both ways. Fame made me a balloon. Cause my ego inflated when I flew see, but it was confusing.
And welcome back to Cowboys Central Radio. We are now joined by Paul Schwartz from the New York Post. He's going to talk a little bit about the New York Giants game against the Cowboys coming up. Paul, first off, thanks for jumping on the show with us. And And first off, I want to ask you about the Giants and what has happened over the last 4 weeks. 4 weeks ago, everybody seemed to be ready to write them out. They're done. They're out of this. And now all of a sudden, 4 weeks later, they're potentially, with a victory this Sunday, will move into second place behind the Eagles.
Yeah, well, look, when you're 0-6, I think people have a right to write you off, you know? I mean, you don't make the playoffs at 0-6. Never been done. Giants aren't used to starting 0-6. You know, obviously, under Tom Coughlin, Giants have been a very fast-starting team. They've been 6-2 or 7-1 or 5-3 every year, and so this was really, really blindsided them out of the blue. Well, what's happened in the last 4 games is, number one, as you guys know from the first game against the Cowboys, the Giants had a massive turnover problem. I mean, just a sickly problem. They had 6 in the first game and only lost by 5. And, you know, Eli Manning had, 15 interceptions in the 6-game losing streak to start the season. Just a ridiculous amount. They had fumbles. They had returns for touchdowns. So they've cleaned up their act in that regard. And number 2, the defense is playing much better. Defense is stopping the run. The first 3 games against the Cowboys, Broncos, and Panthers, the Giants gave up a lot of rushing yards. In the last 7 games, run defense has been excellent. I think the Giants are now 11th overall in defense. Haven't given up a passing touchdown in about 4 games. So defense much better and offense holding the ball are the 2 keys to this 4-game winning streak.
And, Paul, it's not often that in Week 12 that you get a must-win or a playoff-type atmosphere, but that certainly seems to be the way that both of these teams are approaching this game. You know, we've got the Eagles starting to gain momentum and some speed, so I think that there's probably some at least fear in both fan bases that you're going to finally have a team assert themselves and run away with this thing if they don't pick up a win this week. The Giants, after starting 0-6, the team, while everyone else was willing to write them off, the team didn't pack it in. How did Coughlin and the coaching staff keep this group together and the veterans on the team? How did they keep the team from giving up at that point? I know that players will never say that they didn't give a full effort or give up, but certainly you see teams that emotionally have started to hang their heads and pack it in for a season. How did this team keep it together?
Well, there's a bunch of veterans. It's a good question. You know, it's not easy. You know, week after week after week, 6 straight weeks of losing. A lot of veterans on the team. You know, Tom Coughlin is a veteran coach. I don't think people thought he was in danger, although he's the oldest coach in the league. And when you lose and you're old, people start drawing conclusions in that regard. You know, there was no talk about benching the quarterback, even though Eli Manning was playing poorly. You know, the support system was in place. Coach, quarterback, that's the main thing, right? When things are going bad, that's who you look at, that's who you blame, and there really was not going to be any movement in that regard with those 2 guys. You weren't going to put Curtis Painter on the field in place of Eli Manning, and, you know, there really wasn't a lot of appetite here in New York. Let's get rid of Tom Coughlin. At the bye week after 8 games when they were 2-6, the GM, Jerry Reese, came out and was very strong, saying, you know, Tom Coughlin's a great coach. He's working hard. You know, we're going to try to work our way out of this. So, you know, that was the first thing. And also they started bringing in some players. They brought in some new players. They got some guys healthy. And, you know, the management never showed in any way we're going to go with young players. We're not going to try. They brought in some guys. And you know, so it looked like they were still trying to save the season, which indeed they were.
Yeah, and Antrell Roll came out after that 0-6 start and said that they could go on a roll. You know, and it seems like they are able to do that. Is it behind the leadership of Eli Manning, you know, having won 2 Super Bowls? And it seemed in both instances where they had to go on this late season run. Do you think that could be part of the reason why they're doing so well, as they're pulling from the experience of Eli Manning down the stretch? Well,
they're pulling from the experience of a lot of guys. You know, Antrell Roll actually said it when they were 0-4. He said, I think we can win the next 12 games. And, you know, that was met with a lot of, questions and some derision, some sarcasm. And then they lose the next 2. And, you know, every game was, do you think you can win the last 11? Do you think you can win the last 10? But, you know, they took their medicine. It was not easy. Antrell Roll said it was the hardest thing he's ever done in his career, to go through that losing streak. And, you know, a guy like Eli Manning is easy as he goes. You know, he does not get too high or too low, as they say. He doesn't blame guys. He doesn't put too much on his shoulders. He kind of stays the course. And yeah, I think that calmness when you're losing, sometimes people look at it and say, well, he doesn't care. But everyone knows that's just Eli's way. He's won 2 Super Bowls that way. And so, yeah, sure. When you're 0-6, you always look for reasons. And a lot of times if there's any hint that there can be a quarterback change, teams will do that. They'll put in the young guy. They'll put in somebody else. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But with Eli, there was never any consideration of that. And, in the long run, everyone just figured he's got to play better, and he has played better.
And, Paul, obviously this league is a game of survival when it comes to injuries. The Giants early showed, much like the Cowboys, a maddening ability to concentrate injuries in specific position groups. Certainly running back and offensive line, they were bit there. The Cowboys defensively, on their defensive line and linebacking core. The Giants now coming into this week, how does the health of the team look as they prepare for this week? Are there new faces that we should expect back, or folks that might be missing this game that Cowboys fans should be looking for?
Well, they're fairly healthy. A couple of things from practice on Wednesday. Hakeem Nicks didn't practice, which was a surprise. He was not on the original injury report, but he's got a little bit of a groin issue. But I think he'll be okay. It's been a tough year for Nicks. He's the only receiver in football that has more than 35 catches and does not have a single touchdown. So, that's not what the Giants have expected from Nicks. Otherwise, one thing to remember to look at, Trumaine McBride, who's filled in pretty nicely at cornerback because Corey Webster's been out. I don't think Corey Webster will play this week. He's practiced a little bit today, but I think it'll probably be another week for him. He has a high ankle sprain. But Trumaine McBride has a hip pointer, and, you need cornerbacks when you play the Cowboys. It sounds like Miles Austin might be back, and, Des Bryant, obviously. So you need cornerbacks, and, the Giants could be a little short if McBride can't play, but I think he'll probably be okay. And Jason Pierre-Paul did not practice, but that wasn't surprising. His shoulder is still sore, but, unless he has a major setback, he'll play. He didn't practice much at all last week and, came back and played pretty well and obviously had a, tremendous highlight film interception and touchdown return against the Packers, and he was named NFC Defensive Player of the Week because of that.
And Paul, you touched a little bit on about the players that can make an impact. You're talking about nicks and injuries, but I want to know, for the Giants, what does success look like this week, and what does failure look like for the Giants?
Good question. The Giants in this 4-game winning streak have beaten Josh Freeman, and they've beaten Michael Vick on one leg, and Matt Barkley, who's a rookie, obviously, Terrell Pryor on one knee, and Scott Tolzien making his first NFL start. So it's not exactly a murderer's row of quarterbacks. This is a major step up with Tony Romo. He's the best quarterback they've faced in a long time. And so, that's going to be number one, keeping him in check. The Giants usually do a decent job against Romo. Not great. Romo's had his moments against the Giants, certainly, but if they can limit big plays, I think that'll be a big factor. Prince Amukamara, I think, is pretty well equipped to deal with Des Bryant. Pretty well equipped. He did a good job on him in the first game, but Miles Austin had about 10 catches in the first game, so that's a problem there. Jason Witten had career days against the Giants, so that's also an issue. I think the Giants need to be balanced. They need to run the ball. It's supposed to be very cold and very windy on Sunday, in the 30s and a lot of wind. So, depending on how the wind's swirling, it might be difficult for Eli Manning and Tony Romo to get the passing game going at certain points of the game. Andre Brown has been a real big part of this team. He did not play against the Cowboys the first game. He came off a broken leg, missed the first 8 games, and he's added a quality running back situation for the Giants. With Brandon Jacobs doing some of the dirty work. So I think number one, run the ball enough to keep the Cowboys honest, keep the pass rush, and DeMarcus Ware off Eli's back. And as far as defensively, just limit some big plays. They've done very well against the run. Just limit some of the big plays, make the Cowboys earn everything they get.
Well, and Paul, as far as the players in New York, we obviously got a lot of play out of Jason Pierre-Paul's comments this week going into this game. There's sort of a history back and forth, certainly with Giants players and Cowboys players sniping at each other a little bit in the press. Were you surprised that Pierre-Paul came out and basically, professed such confidence that they were going to put it on the Cowboys and that there would be blood spilled and all of the things that I'm sure that have been quoted at length in your media outlets. Were you surprised that he stepped out and said that going to this game, or is that just exemplary of the confidence that the defense is playing with right now?
Well, I mean, it's exemplary of of JPP. When Jason Pierre-Paul is not feeling healthy, which he has not for a lot of this year, he's coming off back surgery. Not that he's moped around, but he doesn't say a lot. I don't know if I can play. We'll see what I can do. I'm not going to be 100% this year. And when he's feeling better, he starts to chirp. That's just the way he is. He's kind of he's a little bit of a goofball in some ways, in not a bad way. So, look, does he really think there's going to be bloodshed? I don't think so. We know what he's talking about. He said it again today. He said, there's going to be bloodshed. We're going to leave it out there. He said it's like our Super Bowl. It's not a playoff game. It's like our Super Bowl. Now that's a bit much. But he said it. I think it's an indication more of JPP. That's the way he is. When he's feeling good, he feels invincible. He talks up a good game. I'm sure it, rattled the Cowboys a little bit, rattled their cages. Not rattled them, but I mean, get their attention. The Cowboys didn't really snipe back at that, but I'm sure they're, anxious to get after JPP and see what he's got. No, these are rivals. They don't like each other. Justin Tuck always says he really, really dislikes the Cowboys. The America's team thing is still there, even though the Giants have had a lot more success than the Cowboys in recent years. So, no, I'm not surprised. That's these teams don't like each other. There's no question about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a rivalry game, and it seems as of late, you talk about the success of the Giants, it seems like the Cowboys and Giants have become more of the rival than what used to be the ideal rivalry for the Cowboys was either with the Eagles or the Redskins. But real quick before we let you go, Paul, what would your prediction be for Sunday against the Cowboys?
That's a tough one. I'm not 100. Haven't really formalized it in my head. If you want to ask me, I think the Giants have a good chance to win. I'll probably pick the Giants. They are at home. It's their third straight home game. I like the fact that Cowboys are coming off a bye. That's good for them. If DeMarcus Ware is healthier, he's a force, a real force. If Miles Austin is healthier with the hamstring, he's definitely a factor. I don't like the fact that Sean Lee is out. Obviously, I'm sure it's well documented in Dallas. He's such a great player. He can single-handedly pretty much, do damage to a running game. So, I think that's a big, big loss for the Cowboys. Very, very hard to overcome. It'll be tough. It's always tough. There's always crazy plays. It's always back and forth. As long as the Giants can keep a handle on their turnovers, keep them very manageable, keep them down. And then another thing, the Cowboys special teams are better than the Giants special teams. There's no doubt about it. Giants have been very, very up and down in special teams, and that could be a big factor. But I think the Giants will find a way. I think they're going to have a big, big game. They'll be home. It'll be exciting. But then the pressure's still on. They got to go to Washington and win. They got to go to San Diego and win. When you're 0-6, you have no margin for error. So I don't think this train is going to keep on rolling into the playoffs here, but I do think it'll probably keep rolling for another week.
All right, Paul, we appreciate you joining the show. And Patrick, do you want to give Paul's Twitter address where folks can follow him on Twitter?
Yeah, Paul, why don't you go ahead and let our listeners know where they can follow you if they want to get some Giants info this week.
Oh, sure, thanks. It's NYP Schwartz Schwartz _ NYP Sports, something like that. I think just to type in Paul Schwartz, it'll come out, and you'll see it.
All right, well, we definitely appreciate it, Paul, and look forward to the game on Sunday.
All right, thanks, guys.
Kevin, Storm, and Norman.
Please check us out every Wednesday night, 11 p.m. Eastern Time, for the home of the #1 NFC team in the league, Seahawks Central Radio.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Do you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once? I am one of those melodramatic fools, neurotic to the bone, no doubt about it. Sometimes I give myself the creeps.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the show. We are now going to get into some Giants talk. We did talk with Paul Schwartz a little bit ago. He gave us his prediction of a Giants win. Keith, so we have the game on Sunday. We know it's going to be cold. It looks here, looking at the line as of right now, Giants are a 2.5-point favorite. So essentially, the way Vegas betting goes is it's essentially a push because everybody knows the home team gets 3 points. So it's basically a pick 'em. So I want to know your keys to the game, your X factor, and who wins the game.
Well, so as far as keys to the game, and I think that I probably struggle with finding a lot of confidence in this iteration of the Cowboys, much like you are at this point in the season. We've seen too much at this point, right? I think we've clearly revealed that the defense isn't a unit that you can count on to carry half of the load. The offense, while they rank 5th in the league in scoring, it isn't something that since the Broncos game it hasn't been right. And they've been held to under 400 yards since then, held under 300 a couple of times, which in this league is a joke, right? It's a league that's turned into a fast break up and down the field type of league, and to have that inability to sustain offense is ridiculous. So we've talked about what they do in the bye, how much introspection and self-scouting would go on. Is this team going to come out and really show some different wrinkles offensively? I think that'll be a clear indication of whether they think that they're purely dealing with an execution issue, or whether they think that from a coaching standpoint, they should have been doing more to get their biggest weapons involved in the game. So, and it's probably a bit of both, right? But I think that if they don't come out and show something radically different in terms of being less willing to surrender their weapons, and obviously Dez Bryant in particular, they've had trouble getting Witten involved. I think that there's no reason to expect that this team goes on the road into an iffy weather situation and a hostile crowd and comes out with a victory. So I have a difficult time predicting victory at this point. I think that in terms of keys to the game, I think the Giants are going to try and run the ball on the Cowboys. We talked a little bit about Ernie Sims filling in for Sean Lee at the middle linebacker spot. I'm much less worried about the rookie starting at strong linebacker and Devontae Holloman. And Sims, he's had difficulty getting off blocks. He's been extraordinarily susceptible to play action, and I think in the run game he's a guesser. He's someone that has difficulty playing his run fits in the scheme, and will jump to one side or another of blocks, opening up lanes that could certainly gash the Cowboys. So with Andre Brown's return at running back, I think the Cowboys are in for a long day of the Giants running the ball at them, and ultimately having to commit the safeties, the return of J.J. Wilcox and Barry Church, having to commit them more to the run game, which exposes them to a quarterback that's already joined the group that's thrown for 400 yards against the Cowboys this season. So there's a very good opportunity for Eli to go for 400 a second time, which certainly might be unprecedented in team history. I would expect that it is. So I definitely have a hard time seeing the Cowboys coming out with a win on the road until they show us a lot more. There were only 2 players missing from practice today, which is actually remarkably healthy for this point in the season. Of course, there are several players on injured reserve, but in terms of the players on hand, the 2 linebackers, Justin Duran on the strong side, Lee in the middle, were the only 2 players that missed practice today. So, but I think that the Giants' running game is probably the biggest key. If the Cowboys can manage to control it, I think they have a good chance then with the return of J.J. Wilcox and Morris Claiborne, they have a good chance of maybe turning Eli over like they did in the first game. It's not like Eli has gone completely away from turning over the football during these 4 games the Giants have won. But I think that so as far as an X factor, I think my X factor is going to be Devontae Holloman. Holloman gets his first start. He's a player that in the preseason opened with a splash with a pick 6 in the Hall of Fame game, had sacks, stripped the ball, forced fumbles, had another interception in the preseason. He's got incredible instincts. He played as a safety at South Carolina before migrating to that hybrid spur linebacker role. Pure linebacker here, but he seems to be that kind of player that you'll hear coaches say the football just finds him. So I think if there's an X factor for the Cowboys to win, it'll be one of the stand-in linebackers, and in this case I think Holloman making a big play, turning Eli over and giving the offense an extra chance. But I think that, I think the Giants are going to run the ball, and that's going to open up their passing game. And we haven't seen the Cowboys show an ability to slow anyone down through the air. So I think as far as a prediction, I look at this one as 28-21 Giants. And at that point, do the Cowboys have anything left, or does this team go into a free fall? The mental state of the team, while they might say all the right things with microphones in front of them, I am curious at this point, as they sort of stand on that precipice, what is the frailty of this team mentally, and is there a chance that they're teetering on the brink where a loss or even a bad first half could send them spiraling to the bottom and end up in that scorched earth scenario we've talked about, where we're again looking at coaching upheaval, we're looking at veteran players hitting the road, and a totally different look for the Cowboys going into next year. So unfortunately, until they show us more, and until we see that the players returning from injury aren't on a snap count and are really able to contribute at some of the levels they have for this team in the past, I have to look at the home team in a wintry weather condition coming out with a victory in this one.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you as far as what the keys are. Running the ball, obviously, passing. When you touched a little bit on you're talking about Eli Manning has already joined the 400 club against this team. Drew Brees last week was only 8 yards away from doing that exact same thing. Drew Brees had 392 yards last week. Their ability to stop the pass, stop the run, they really can't stop anybody at this point. As we saw last week, Mark Ingram, a guy who's been booed out of the stadium in New Orleans. They weren't happy. They spent a first-round draft pick on this guy. He hasn't lived up to it. And last week he goes 14 carries, 145 yards, has his first ever 100-yard game, and obviously a ridiculous 10.4 rushing average. Pierre Thomas, he added another 87 yards. I mean, the receivers, they had 4 receivers go over 60 yards in that game. The Dallas offense is inept in all aspects. Last week, 128 yards for Tony Romo. I mean, DeMarco Murray was able to get a running game going. He actually got in the end zone. 89 yards and 16 carries. 5.6 average. That's a good average for a running back. But Dez Bryant, 1 catch for 44 yards. And the only reason that he got that was that Tony Romo at the line told him and Beasley to switch. And then he targeted him, and then you didn't hear from him for the rest of the game. It's the ineptitude on this entire roster. I mean, you're talking about middle-of-the-road passing game, averaging 250 yards a game. That's 13th in the league. As far as running the ball, they're 28th with 77 yards a game. That is an inept offense. I mean, offensively, they're allowing 313 yards average a game. And you could throw in some other quarterbacks that they faced, and they haven't really faced a lot of great ones, but the ones that they have played have given up, have gotten that 400, 500 yards. So they're dead last in opponents' passing yards. They're 29th in the NFL, giving up 126.8 yards per game running the ball. So I think it's going to be more of that style this coming week. One stat that I looked at coming off the bye week, under Jason Garrett, they are 0-3 coming off the bye week. So it shows me that he is not he's not able to get this team prepared to play. Another reason why I'm not a fan of Jason Garrett moving forward. You going back, look at the great coaches. Just go back to when Jimmy Johnson took over, 5-0 after a bye week. Even Barry Switzer, as much as Cowboy fans like to make fun of him, 4-0 after a bye week. Bill Parcells, 3-0 after a bye week. So it's these guys that they're getting these teams prepared. So for that simple fact alone, I do not see the Cowboys coming out in this game. My X factor is going to be Andre Brown running the ball. Yeah, my X factor is a Giant. I think that he's going to run the ball. Those safeties are going to have to creep up. And right now, do you expect the Cowboys to play one-on-one against Hakeem Nicks, against Cruz, who has torched this team before? So that is why I'm going to take the Giants over the Cowboys, and I see it a little more than a little higher scoring than you have. I'll take the Giants 35-31 over the Cowboys, and that's going to do it for this episode of Cowboys Central Radio. For Keith Mullins, you can follow him at Keith Deuces. I'm Patrick Kahn. Follow me at Pat Sports Guy, and we'll see you next week.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.